In Boulia, these 4 landmarks of beauty are part of humanity's protected heritage.
Fred, we are seeing images coming out of Tehran as this announcement becomes public. What more can you tell us from your perspective?
Yeah, some of these images are people who are celebrating in Tehran and in other places. This is something that's being shown on state TV. The announcement, of course, coming here really in the middle of the night, about an hour ago. And what's been going on here in Tehran and other cities is that there's been these vigils overnight as the combat operations have been going on. Of course, a lot of these airstrikes that happened here on Tehran, they also happen in the middle of the night as well. But essentially, what happened is that a very low-key statement was read on state TV announcing that Mojtaba Khamenei, now Ayatollah Sayed Mojtaba Khamenei, was the 3rd supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Of course, succeeding his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in that airstrike a little over a week ago. And in many ways, as far as the policies of the Islamic Republic is concerned, people believe that this is something that stands for continuity of the policies of Ali Khamenei, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, but of course also a very important signal now that these combat operations, that this war, as the Iranians call it, is going on. And it really also plays into some of the things that we've heard from other leaders here in Iran as well. For instance, the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Larijani, who said that at this point in time, Iran is not looking for a ceasefire in with the United States, that Iran is looking to avenge the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, even threatening U.S. President Donald Trump. There was also tonight another high-profile interview with the Speaker of Parliament, who's become extremely important also to the combat effort here of the Iranian military, also saying that the Iranians at this point in time don't want a ceasefire with the United States. Mojtaba Khamenei, for his part, is someone who's well respected by the security apparatus, by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He is someone who the security apparatus and the folks here believe is going to continue the policies of his father as they have been before. And as really it seems as though this state is gearing up for what could be a protracted war with the United States and with Israel. It's an absolutely apocalyptic scene here. We've just made it to the Shahran oil depot, which was attacked last night in a massive
This is a home that was hit by one of the Iranian ballistic missiles, the shrapnel. You can see the damage, what's left of here. This is a home that's been in the family for 5 generations, and by the looks of it, in 1 second this afternoon, it was destroyed, and you can see what's left of it. They're trying to clean it outside, but there's nothing left here.
Nothing. Only memories.
So this is one of the cluster munitions, likely, that came from the Iranian ballistic missile. At the same time, there were a number of reports of damage all over the place, and it looks like, especially when you look around at what we're looking at here, that one came through the roof, perhaps down some sort of opening on the roof, and exploded and left this, what's left of the apartment here. And you can look in every direction. The entire apartment is destroyed, and by the looks of it, it's very possible the entire building will have to be torn down here.
למזלנו לא היה אף אחד בדירה, זה בית ישן, כמעט בן 100 שנה, אין לו מקלט, הם היו במקלט השכונתי.
רצו ברגע ששמעו את האזעקות?
ברגע ששמעו את האזעקות, יצאו למקלט השכונתי.
When you look around the apartment, you can see all the wreckage, of course, but you can also see what was here. For example, in this corner behind me here is a toilet. There was a wall here. The refrigerator that was about where I'm standing is now over there. That was a sitting area, a living room. The TV still on the wall there. It's unbelievable to think that this was one part.
It's an absolutely
watching the news to find out about a conflict they're in the middle of. Kathy from Michigan moved to Dubai just 2 weeks ago to join her husband. Now her government has told her to leave.
How did you feel when you saw that directive that you should depart now from the Middle East?
I felt, well, I better get looking on flights, but I knew that the airport was closed, so I thought, how am I meant to depart?
Michael is a school principal in Dubai. Schooling in the UAE is virtual all week. He has managed to secure them a flight to his home country, Australia, in a few days to reunite with their children.
Your children are older, 18 and 21. They understand what's going on. What have they been saying to you?
They have been keeping in contact daily and wondering, when are we coming out? And they're planning to meet me at the airport, and so they're waiting. They're worried.
Dubai Airport is prioritising passengers whose flights were cancelled over the past 5 days. Even then, it's a lottery to find out if they are assigned to one of the very few flights actually taking off. Many own a cycle of booking, hoping, then being cancelled. There are some in Dubai, though, who appear to be taking the turmoil in stride, sunning by the pool in between alerts and interceptions.
That's I don't think it's an appropriate question. You know, I'm not going to answer it. Could there be? Possibly, for very good reason. Have to be very good reason. And I would say if we ever did that, they would be so decimated that they wouldn't be able to fight at the ground level. A lot of negotiating leverage, maybe maximum, but we're not looking to settle. They'd like to settle. We're not looking to settle. They're on their third or fourth level of leadership, and they have leaders right now.
Iran's Assembly of Experts has chosen Mujtaba Khamenei to succeed his father as the country's supreme leader. Well, he was born on the 8th of September 1969. He is the second son of Ali Khamenei's 6 children. He studied under prominent clerics, including his father. Mujtaba has largely kept a low profile. He's never held any government office. He's never given public speeches or interviews. What is fascinating is how much we don't really know about him.
Images and videos.
Oil soars above $100 a barrel as the war in Iran hits production across the Middle East.
Jump doesn't quite capture what we've just had at the opening of Asian trade in oil. It absolutely spiraled the oil price.
The spike in oil prices sees stock markets in Asia plunge, with no signs of the US and Israel's war with Iran easing. And there's a warning that supplies of essential materials for computer chips could be disrupted by the conflict, adding more uncertainty to global markets. Hello and welcome to Business Today. I'm Vandana Ban. Oil prices have surged above $100 a barrel as the US-Israel war with Iran continues. Prices spiked around 20% in early trading, hitting their highest since July 2022 amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Producers in the Middle East are cutting production as strikes hit depots and the Strait of Hormuz effectively closes to tankers. President Trump says the increases are a very small price to pay and claimed they would drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over. Well, let's get more details with our Asia business reporter, Nick Marsh. Nick, what's the latest on oil?
We'll put it this way, Vandana. Last week, we saw an increase in the price of oil of about 20% over the space of a week, and we were wondering what the economic ramifications would be there. Today, in the space of a morning, we've seen a jump of 20%. Clearly, traders have looked at what's happened over the weekend, the naming of the Ayatollah's successor, his son, another hardliner. They've looked at the attacks on energy infrastructure all across the Gulf, also in Iran. They've seen that producers of oil, such as Iraq, for example, but all across the Middle East are saying, look, we're going to really slash our production because nothing is getting through the Strait of Hormuz. And they've concluded that this conflict is going to go on for a while, hence the incredible increase in the price of oil, well over $100 a barrel. And the fear among traders and the markets and the global economy is that this could just be the start.
And this is having a huge impact on the Asia markets, is it not?
Yeah, it has. I mean, we saw in South Korea, the authorities there actually had to introduce a circuit breaker to suspend trade because the stock index there, the Kospi, went down by more than 8%. We're seeing a drop now currently of around 7%, more or less, in the Nikkei, in Japan, around 2.5%, in Hong Kong as well. That's, not just being spooked by the war and the potential escalation and the duration of this conflict. It also reflects the fact that Asia is a huge importer of oil and gas. Japan, China, South Korea all need it to power their economies. And the longer that the price stays elevated, the bigger the impacts we're going to see on all of these economies.
Nick, really appreciate you getting us up to speed. Nick Marsh there in our newsroom. Now, as we mentioned, the key shipping route in the Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed due to the war in Iran. Around 20% of the world's oil and gas normally passes through the waterway, as well as cargo, with an average of 80 ships a day navigating the strait. Iran says it has complete control of the area and it will set fire to any ships trying to pass through it, meaning a big impact on global shipping. Salim Khan is Chief Data and Analytics Officer at maritime intelligence firm Polestar Global and told me more.
No oil tanker has crossed the Strait of Hormuz since March 1st. In the weeks leading up to the conflict, we saw a daily average shipment of approximately $1.5 billion worth of crude oil and liquefied natural gas. On the day of the attack on February 28th, we saw that number drop by 98% to just $46 million worth of oil moving out of the region. This is very concerning development, obviously, because the Strait of Hormuz is the single most important choke point in global energy. And what we're seeing right now is a complete pause on that traffic.
To talk about reports of ships going dark just to get through the strait. From your data, how are ships trying to, hide from the Iranian drones? Does it work? What are the risks here?
Yeah, so we're seeing a number of distinct behaviors. The first thing we're seeing, as I mentioned, is cessation of all activity. So we're seeing near total cessation of commercial traffic through the strait, as mentioned earlier. But I should also mention that a number of vessels that did leave the region are interestingly broadcasting their destination as, quote, China owner or all crew. So this is flagging that this is a Chinese-owned vessel, potentially sparing them from Iranian attacks. So that's behavior number one. Behavior number two, getting to the AIS, the spoofing that we're seeing. So AIS is the automatic identification system on these vessels. It's sort of a GPS location mechanism, but we're seeing a tremendous amount of jamming and spoofing. Jamming occurs when radio frequency signals for missile defense systems and things like that kind of block out the signal for these vessels. Spoofing occurs when a vessel, is trying to hide where it is. It's trying to go dark. So we are seeing both, scenarios happening here for AIS spoofing. And finally, one last point here on evasion, we are seeing floating storage. So we are seeing that there's approximately 540 oil tankers in our data set that's showing that they're on the ocean right now. And what they're actually saying their destination is that they're awaiting orders. And so essentially you have 314 million barrels of oil awaiting orders out at sea right now, which means they have no destination at the moment. They're essentially floating storage. And at the current spot rate, this floating storage is worth $30 billion.
Elsewhere, there's a warning the war in Iran could disrupt supply of key materials for manufacturing semiconductors. A South Korean lawmaker has said difficulty sourcing gases like helium, much of which is produced by Qatar, would have a major knock-on effect on the chip industry. Now, chip makers are already struggling to meet surging demand from AI data centers and other consumer technology. Christopher Miller is author of Chip War, The Fight for the World's Most Critical Technology. I asked him what the impacts of such a disruption might be.
I think the honest answer is it's too soon to tell. We've seen the chip industry face shortages of certain types of gases and materials before. And the supply chain is extraordinarily complex. Companies often don't even understand their full vulnerabilities. And so companies themselves are having trouble figuring out what the exact impact is actually going to be.
South Korea has also recently identified 14 other critical items for the chip supply chains. I mean, that is also sourced from the Middle East. Do you see these as replaceable dependencies?
Well, we're going to find out. We don't exactly know. What we can say with some confidence is that the chip industry is a high-value consumer of many types of industrial gases. And so if there are alternative sources of supply, those will be generally rerouted towards the semiconductor industry because disruptions to chip production are just so costly. And so the question is, are there certain materials that just can't be supplied from anywhere else? And those are the materials that we should be the most concerned about.
Today's big question is all about oil. I mean, chip manufacturing is so energy intensive. With Brent crude now above $100 a barrel, how is that likely going to affect the industry?
I don't think the industry is going to feel an immediate impact from higher energy prices. It's true that you need a fair amount of electricity, for example, to power chip making facilities, but that's actually a small share of the overall cost of production. What I think the industry is more worried about is what's the impact of higher oil on the global economy? What does it mean for demand for smartphones and computers and AI servers? Because if higher oil prices are sustained over a longer period of time, that'll reduce consumers' ability to buy new phones and therefore to use new chips.
I guess that was going to be my next question. This sustained energy spike, could it force a slowdown in this AI boom that we've been seeing?
Well, it's a risk. It's certainly a risk. I think if we have higher energy prices over time, it'll lead the Federal Reserve to be slower in reducing interest rates, raising the cost of capital, and making it more difficult for U.S. tech companies and global tech companies to borrow money to build data centers. So certainly something to track closely.
Talking about data centers, I mean, right now the Middle East was in the midst of becoming an AI hub. I mean, do you think companies will be reevaluating that given this conflict now, and especially that some of those data centers were hit last week?
I do think so. It's not a surprise to see data centers targeted, given that they're at the centerpiece of many countries' economic modernization and technological leadership strategies. But it does highlight the importance of having data center capacity in the most secure countries and locations. And for countries in the Middle East, that'll be a harder sell going forward.
Chris, just looking ahead to this week, what will you and I guess the industry in general be looking ahead to this week?
Well, it seems like the two key questions are, first off, will shipping via the Straits of Hormuz return to some semblance of normality? And second, in the semiconductor industry in particular, do we find alternative sources of supply for some of the materials that are currently produced in the region? Thus far, it's just too soon to tell, but I'm sure the industry is going to be tracking that and trying to find alternative sources very diligently.
That's it from Business Today and from us here in Singapore. But do stay with BBC News. We'll have all the latest on our top lines as Mojtaba Khamenei is succeeding his father as Iran's supreme leader. And you can get all those latest details on the BBC News website. We have a live page there on bbc.com/news.
So we are saying, of course, it's an opportunity for them. We hope they will rise up. I saw incredible pictures of protests in London of Israelis and Iranian expats together celebrating this possible change, and all over the world, by the way.
جوب بنزینا رو ریختن تو جوبا، همینجوری آتیش گرفته مغازه و خونه های مردم. وای وای.
Hell on earth. That's how someone living in this dark described it. Tehran was on fire last night, the Shahran oil depot in flames. One of 30 Israel said it bombed across Iran. The biggest attack in this war on the country's oil facilities, the lifeblood of its economy. Fire tore through the streets towards shops and homes, into ancient water channels. They're meant to irrigate the trees, cool the city, not burn it. Hassan had been heading to the depot at dusk when the first missile struck.
I turned the truck around on the street so it would be away from the danger, but then when they fired the first missile, two more struck right afterwards. The first one struck right over there. Then the gasoline started flowing towards the residential areas.
Today, Tehran was shrouded in toxic smoke. When the rain came, it was black too. Some residents spoke of their suffering in messages sent to the BBC's Persian service.
They've blown it up. Oil depot, Hisar and Baghestan areas. It was as if the night has suddenly turned into day.
The city is really covered in smoke. You can smell the burning. I can't see the sun. There is a horrible smoke. It's still there. I'm very tired. I've been indoors the whole time.
The port city of Bushehr in the south was also targeted. These satellite images show the impact at its naval base. including a capsized vessel at its jetty. The airbase was hit too. This is what it looks like now. Iran is still hitting back. Fragments of an intercepted missile struck this home in Tel Aviv. The emergency services say 8 people were injured today in waves of missile barrages. Some managed to get through Israel's prized air defenses. But Israel and the US say their campaign is succeeding faster than expected.
What we are aiming for is very clear objectives. One, Iran cannot have nuclear capability, and they were rushing again to that capability. Number 2, their long-range missiles. It's also a golden opportunity for the people of Iran to rise up and bring change. We leave it up to them.
And now, there's a new target. Tonight, State TV made the long-awaited announcement. Mojtaba Khamenei is Iran's new supreme leader. He assumes his father's mantle. In his mold, a hardliner, close to the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guards. The man President Trump didn't want, the leader Israel says is in their sights. The commander-in-chief in charge of Iran's existential battle.
Well, we can talk to Lise Doucette live, our chief international correspondent. Lise, give us further reaction, please, to this announcement.
Well, as you just heard in that report, or waiting to see what President Trump will have to say, he repeatedly made it clear that he wanted to be involved in the choice. That was unthinkable. But he also made it clear who he didn't want, and that was Mojtaba Khamenei. He said he was someone who wouldn't bring, in his words, peace and harmony to Iran. As you know, Roz, President Trump was looking for, as he would put it, a Delcy Rodriguez, in other words, the person who stepped in Venezuela after Nicolas Maduro, the president, was extracted without any American casualties, without any chaos. But Iran is not Venezuela, and the choice of Khamenei underlines that Iran now, especially with the hardline Islamic Revolutionary Guard being really the real power behind this throne in Iran, are calling the shots now, and they have very close links with Mojtaba Khamenei. There will be disappointment, deep disappointment among Iranians, those who had taken to the streets in January in large numbers across the country, who had called Mojtaba's father a dictator, who called for the end of the Islamic Republic, that rule. But they will also hope that, even though this is a sign of continuity and connection to hardline forces, they will hope that his son's days are numbered, and Israel has made it absolutely clear that they are now going to hunt him down.
And what do we know of his relations with other countries in the region? Clearly, at the moment, Iran is attacking a number of them, but do we know if he has relations which may see him choose a different course to what has played out in the last 9 days?
He's said to be in the mold of his father. He's said to be close to Ari Larijani, who is the man who effectively is running Iran, had been put in power in the run-up to war by Ayatollah Khamenei. He's head of the National Security Council and very close to Russia. But the rest of the world doesn't know much about Mojtaba Khamenei, and Iranians don't know much about Mojtaba Khamenei. In fact, some people tonight were saying that no one's even heard his voice. He has been in the shadows for decades, working in his father's office. His name was first mentioned really in public and in a controversial way was in 2005, where he was accused by reformist politicians of engineering election rigging to bring Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to power. And Mehdi Karoubi, one of the politicians, has accused him of being the master's son in reference to his father. And the rebuke was, no, he is a master on his own. So he very much is familiar to the deep state of Iran, and I think the world will start finding out about him. But he's very, very much in his father's mold.
Not long after Iran confirmed its new supreme leader. I spoke with the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Adam Smith, and got his reaction.
Well, I think it underscores the difficulty of making substantial changes in the Iranian regime. And that seems to be one of the central goals of President Trump in this war, is to get a leadership in Iran that is more amenable to U.S. interests. And the selection of the late Ayatollah's son sort of, I think, underscores how hard it's going to be to get to that more friendly Iranian regime.
And Donald Trump's already indicated in the last few days that this selection would be unacceptable. There has to be a possibility that either America or Israel now targets the new supreme leader. Would you support that?
No, I don't think we should make it our business to assassinate the leader of countries that we do not like. Now, his father was a different case. His father had clearly threatened U.S. interests. We were in a conflict. I mean, I don't support the war, but I can at least have some understanding of wanting to target him. But if we simply say, no matter who's leading Iran, we're going to keep trying to kill them, I think that sets a very dangerous precedent for how countries are going to interact across the globe, none of which, gets into the issue of how do we deal with the threat that Iran poses. But I don't think it should be the United States foreign policy position that, if there's a leader of a country we don't like, we're going to go try and kill them. I am worried about how the precedent that sets.
You referenced that you're against this war. Does this selection and the fact that clearly the Iranian regime is not minded to change course cause you to reassess that position?
No. Look, Iran is a very, very difficult challenge without question. But the idea that because it's a difficult question that we should go to war and start dropping bombs and that's necessarily the solution, I think is a mistake. And look, these are lessons we should have learned. And I've been in Congress for all of this, for Iraq, for Afghanistan, for Libya, for Syria, a bunch of different things that we thought about and looked at. The military is not the easy button that the president seems to think it is to solve the problem. And we've already seen this war spread. I think it's around 14 countries have been dragged into it in one way or another. Massive disruption to the global oil supply, massive disruption to the entire economy of the Middle East, which impacts the economy of the world. And Iran is still there and still posing many of the same problems that they posed before. So I think relying on the military to this extent is a mistake. And again, it's a lesson we should have learned over the course of the last 30 years, a lesson that President Trump on the campaign trail when he was running for office said he had learned. He said he wouldn't get us into a war with Iran specifically. And here we are. I think he should have heeded his own advice.
Now, I wonder, in your capacity as a ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, you will clearly be privy to information that most of us aren't. Have you been shown any evidence that there was an imminent threat from Iran? The president has repeatedly referenced this.
No, I don't think there's any debate that there was not an imminent threat in any meaningful sense of that word. Iran was not getting ready
Last June, Conservative presidential candidate Miguel Uribe Turbay was shot during a campaign event in Bogotá. Hundreds of candidates have received death threats, and election monitors say this has been one of the most dangerous campaigns in decades. Critics say negotiations with armed groups have allowed some to expand their control as cocaine production hit record levels. Liliana's running mate, whose vehicle was shot returning from a campaign event, says communities here are still waiting for the promises of peace.
Social transformations never arrived, and investment never reached the
President Trump wisely does not remove options off of the table.
Mothers out there are worried that we're going to have a draft, that they're going to see their sons get in and daughters get involved in this. What do you want to say about the president's plans for troops on the ground? As we know, it's been largely an air campaign up until now.
It has been, and it will continue to be. And President Trump wisely does not remove options off of the table. I know a lot of politicians like to do that quickly, but the president, as commander-in-chief, wants to continue to assess the success of this military operation. It's not part of the current plan right now, but the president, again, wisely keeps his options on the table. But as commander-in-chief, there's no greater priority or responsibility to this president than, of course, protecting the American people and protecting our troops.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sally Bundock. Iran has named Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the late Supreme Leader, as his successor. He replaces his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed at his compound in Tehran in the first wave of US and Israeli strikes. He's seen as a hardliner, and shortly after his appointment, Iran fired barrages of missile and drones at targets in Israel and across the Gulf, signalling Tehran's determination to fight on. There's been no word yet from Mojtaba Khamenei, but President Trump has previously warned that any new leader would not last long if Tehran did not first get his approval. Well, we've seen a massive reaction on financial markets already this morning. The price of oil has spiked, surging past $100 a barrel. In Asia, financial markets are tumbling. We'll be getting all the latest on that in just a moment. But first, let's reflect on the news of the new Supreme Leader with Dr. Sahar Razavi, Director of Iranian and Middle Eastern Studies at the Center of California State University. Good to speak to you again, Dr. Razani. So give us your take on this news of a new Supreme Leader.
Thanks for having me back. The Supreme Leader has basically signaled to us all, both domestically and internationally, that there is an intent there to maintain a great deal of continuity between the previous Supreme Leader and the next phase. There are many different people who could have been selected. The fact that this person was selected, I think, is intended to project both strength and defiance.
Yeah, and business as usual as far as the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is concerned.
That's right. Mojtaba Khamenei has been sort of behind the scenes. The state has tried to project an image of him that he's a religious teacher who just spends time teaching about Islam in the seminaries in Qom. But in fact, he's been his father's right-hand man for quite some time, and he enjoys very close relationships with the Basij paramilitary units and the IRGC. So they are quite loyal to him, as they were to his father. And though he also does have enemies within the system and within Iran, I think right now the most important thing for him is to carry on again, what he sees as defiance against Western intervention.
And how do you expect this news to be received within Iran? Of course, we're getting a few reports as to reaction in Tehran so far, but what are you hearing?
There's a wide range, I think, of reactions. There are some, even among those who are not in favor of the Islamic Republic and would like to see this regime transition to a different type of system. Even among those, there are those who are very opposed to Mojtaba Khamenei being the Supreme Leader because, again, with the continuity that is being projected, they see him as really carrying on the torch of the repression and violence that his father oversaw in Iran for the past several decades. There are others who are right now more concerned about the partition of Iran or the potential descent into civil war or occupation by foreign forces. And so, though they may not be in favor of the Islamic Republic as a whole, they are relieved that the person who has been chosen is not one who they expect to, in their view, capitulate to the West. There are also those who are very much against the Islamic Republic in any way, shape, or form, and at any cost. So for them, they are angry and they are perhaps not surprised, but very unhappy with Khamenei's replacement.
Okay, Dr. Sahar Razavi, thank you again for talking to us and giving us your reaction to the news of the new Supreme Leader, and we'll have more analysis on that in just a moment, but we need to take stock. A new trading week has begun, and of course the global oil markets opened again for trade earlier today during the Asian trading session, and we saw an immediate reaction to some of the latest developments over the weekend, with the price of oil surging some 20% within minutes. The economic consequences of the war is prompting all of this, of course, with the price of a barrel of crude spiraling, the benchmark way above $100 mark now. Now, the spike reflected concerns about the effective shutdown of the Strait
Strait of Hormuz, the targeting of energy infrastructure and the loss of oil production from multiple Gulf states. But we've also seen share markets tumbling again today in Asia. Let's go to our Asia Business Hub and speak to Nick Marsh, who is there for us. So, Nick, what was quite a muted response this time last week, that has all changed.
Yeah, absolutely, Sally. I mean, put it this way, on Friday, we were talking about the price of oil going up by 20% in the space of a week, and we were weighing up what the economic ramifications of that would be. Today, we're talking about the price of oil going up by 20% in the space of a day, in the space of a morning, to be more accurate, really. Why has that happened? Well, you just heard some of it there, the naming of the former Ayatollah's son as his successor, that idea of continuity with the hardline regime. So traders looking at that and thinking, well, this isn't going to end anytime soon. Then you got those dramatic pictures, of course, of the attacks on energy infrastructure and oil and gas depots in Iran, but also all around the Gulf. So lots of Middle Eastern countries saying, well, there's no point us, increasing our output or continuing with our output if nothing is getting through the Strait of Hormuz in particular. I mean, I was just looking at Iraq. The oil output there is plummeted by 70%. Nothing, like I say, getting through the Strait of Hormuz. So traders in this part of the world have taken a look at all of that and decided that this could be going on for quite some time. And a barrel of Brent crude, just for example, like you say, well over that $100 mark.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the share markets, Nick. I mean, Japan now, the main market, the 225, Nikkei 225, down over 7%. Once again, in South Korea, they had to suspend trading, didn't they? Because they hit such a steep decline on stock markets.
Yeah, absolutely. Korea, Japan, you can also make the argument China as well, that's a slightly different thing, all massive importers of oil and gas that comes from the Middle East. Let's not forget, 90% of what's currently stuck there, the millions of barrels of oil and gas, that is destined ultimately for Asia. South Korea, for example, depends a lot on Qatari natural gas to create electricity. And in fact, the government there has just been talking about putting a price cap on fuel, not on gas, but on fuel, so oil imports there. So countries' economies are feeling it. You need to power the factories, you need to power your entire economies, but also the politicians now seeing what's happening, seeing that this is going to have a real impact on cost of living. And let's not forget what happens here in Asia, being such a big manufacturing base, has a huge impact all around the world. And we're seeing this crisis, this conflict, which keeps escalating and escalating, it seems, every day, having real economic impacts in this part of the world, and you'll probably see as the day goes on in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, and Nick, before I let you go, it's interesting to see what President Trump has to say about oil prices, dismissing them on Truth Social, saying it's a very small price to pay. He also says that the markets will react the other way quickly as well. But the problem, isn't it, is if these, oil facilities and oil production centres in the Gulf are standing still, production comes to a halt, that in itself has big consequences, doesn't it?
Well, we're already seeing them, aren't we, Sally? I mean, let's wait and see what happens when the European and then, when Wall Street opens later on today. But it does seem like he's playing a pretty dangerous game in a political sense, Donald Trump, basically dismissing, like you said, those fears that the oil prices are going up and the fact that filling up your car is already becoming much more expensive in the United States. He made his State of the Union address about 10 days ago, all about cost of living, all about gasoline prices going down. And now all of a sudden, due to American and Israeli intervention, ultimately you're seeing the price of oil, the price of gas going up so rapidly, and that's going to be felt in people's pockets. It's one thing to say, okay, if they go up, they go up, and they're going to go down as soon as this is over, but this isn't over yet, and he's going to have to be continuing to field these kinds of questions the longer this goes on.
Brilliant, Nick. Thank you very much indeed, bringing us right up to date on financial markets. Nick Marsh there in Singapore for us. Just to say, we shall have a lot more on the market reaction and the economics and the analysis on what it means to the global economy. I'm just looking at the price of Brent crude now, up 25%, $116 50 cents a barrel. And to a great degree, this sharp reaction is also in reaction to the news that Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, is to be the new supreme leader, the son of the late supreme leader. He is to be his successor. Let's speak to Omid Memarian, who's Iran senior analyst for Dawn, a US-based non-profit organisation focused on US foreign policy. Omid, good to talk to you on BBC News. What's your take on this appointment?
I think that the main criteria for appointing Mojtaba Khamenei as Iran's supreme leader has been to keep the social base of the regime intact and to keep the morale high. At this time, the appointment doesn't seem to reflect what the Iranian people want or what President Trump thinks of the next leader of Iran. What they know is that they are under a lot of pressure. This is one of the most existential crises they have been facing over the past 4 decades. And it's a matter of life and death for the regime. So they have decided to make sure that they keep the morale of their social base, the Revolutionary Guards, the security establishment, the intelligence apparatus intact. And this is the message of this appointment is that the regime is going to pursue what Khamenei was his father, Mojtaba's father, was pursuing, resistance and fight against the U.S. So this is a very sober moment for the Iranian people who have, hated the regime, and many of them hated the regime and Khamenei himself, particularly after the January massacre, and with his son coming to power, it doesn't seem things are going to change inside the country.
Well, that's one of the key conversations that's been in play since this war began, the issue of regime change, whether that could happen. Is it possible, etc., and the different narrative we were getting out of the White House with regards to that, and to a degree from Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel. Do you believe now that this appointment has been announced, a regime change is even less likely?
It could go both ways. The United States and Israel over the past 8 days have, started a full.
Omid, we seem to have lost our line with Omid Memarian. Are we able to see if? No, I'm told, which is really which is a real shame, unfortunately. Omid Memarian there, Iran senior analyst for Dawn, a US-based non-profit organisation focused on US foreign policy. We're just getting his reaction and, of course, his sense of what is ahead now that Iran has announced a new supreme leader. Of course, there's so much more detail on that on our live page on the BBC News website and the BBC News app. Still to come. As we've mentioned, stock markets are tumbling in Japan, in South Korea and other key markets in Asia as the long-feared Gulf energy squeeze comes into focus. We'll have more on that in Business Today. Around the world and across the UK, you're with BBC News. That was drone attack there on the Sitra area south of the capital. Explosions were also heard in the Qatari capital, Doha, as well. Let's speak to a military affairs analyst and retired Marine Corps Colonel Brendan Kearney. Hello to you again.
It's good to talk to you again, Sally.
Now, a lot has happened since you and I last spoke, not least the appointment of a new supreme leader that we have just been discussing in Iran. What is your take on the latest developments?
Well, I think it's, quite honestly, I think it's good that somebody has been appointed into the supreme leadership position, because I think some of what appears to be overall confusion in Iran, based on the foreign minister's comments apologizing for targeting some of the Gulf states, and then almost within a couple hours after his apology, explosions being heard because some aspects of the Iranian military are firing on those states. So there clearly is some command and control problems going on in Iran. And it's nice to have somebody in charge. I'm not sure how long he's going to survive, though, quite frankly.
Well, he is certainly a target, that's for sure. And President Trump is reported to have said he is not happy at all about this appointment. What do you think the latest developments mean in terms of U.S. strategy?
I don't think it's going to change that much. I think, the Israelis and the Americans have pretty much been targeting whoever seems to rise out of the rubble over there to take over as a supreme leader, or at least be mentioned as a possible leader. So I think you're going to continue to see this escalation of air attacks that will be ongoing here for a number of weeks. The most sophisticated aspects of the Iranian air defense system, integrated air defense system, has been destroyed. So you're going to see a much more conventional approach to attacking a very, very long list of targets that's been built over the last 47 years.
How long do you think this could last for?
Well, I think it could last for weeks, if not well into a couple months. I think we're going to find somebody over there, or a group, somebody who will say they represent the Iranian people, that will essentially look for the United States and the Israelis to cease the active military operations. Then it'll be a question of whether the U.S. and the Israelis trust whoever this person or entity is, and then we'll see a ceasefire that, in all likelihood, could resume if it turns out this person or whatever doesn't speak on behalf of the Iranian people.
How long do you think this can go on in the United States politically? We've got news of another fatality in the U.S. Military, a 7th Army personnel killed. What's your take on what President Trump is facing within America in terms of pressure?
Well, it's an interesting, this is one of the more interesting political scenes, Sally. I know what you see over there in the UK, but you have demonstrations in the streets. I was looking at one today in San Francisco, of all places, where it's Iranians that had fled, Iran based on this theocracy that was ongoing over there, and they are absolutely celebrating the U.S. attacks. Of course, you have members of Congress, and of course, the Democratic Party is not going to like anything the president is doing. That's a fact. There's no way to work around that. However, I do think there's an awful lot of American people, especially those of my generation, who think this is long overdue. That's not a popular position with our friends around the world, but it's been 47 years in the making. And we'll have to see whether Congress can go ahead and continue to make noise. They can't. I don't think they have the power to impeach. They don't have the votes. But certainly, if there was great disagreement against what the president is doing, they do have the power of the purse. And that is extraordinarily powerful in our system.
Yeah, it certainly is. Brendan Kearney, thank you again for your time. And we will see you again, I am sure. Well, my colleague Ross Atkins in Washington, D.C. spoke to Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. He asked for his reaction to the appointment of the new Iranian leader.
It really doesn't matter if it is the father or the son. You have to look at the policy. And the policy of this regime is the same policy: to promote terror, to sow chaos, to acquire nuclear capabilities so they can actually assemble it on the ballistic missiles, and to create a situation that they have a control over the region and threatening the region, not only Israel. So I think for us it's more of the same. We will continue with our efforts of this operation to make sure that we actually dismantle this threat.
You say you'll continue with your efforts. Will that include targeting the new supreme leader, just as you did his father?
Anyone who is involved with this terror regime is a legitimate target. And I will tell you that today we have control over the sky of Iran. We obtained air superiority, and we'll continue to target the IRGC and all of those who are collaborating with this regime.
Did you have some hope that perhaps a different choice would be made, that perhaps the military action of the last 9 days would convince those in power in Iran to make a different choice?
Well, I think we know this regime. We have seen their behavior for 47 years. We don't expect them to actually all of a sudden become peaceful. It doesn't work that way. But they could have chosen to play the game, maybe to put somebody who is considered to be more moderate and to try to buy more time. But we saw that they chose to continue with the same hardline perspective, with the same radical ideas, with the same hate against the Western civilization.
Now, bearing in mind what you've just said about the fact that the regime doesn't appear minded to change, in this conflict, you've already said that you believe Donald Trump is making the Middle East safer. After this appointment, do you think that's still true? Because some might look at this and think, well, we're looking at a protracted conflict now.
Absolutely. President Trump is leading toward the right direction, because what we are doing, we are dismantling the capabilities of this regime. So yes, they can choose this guy, that guy, but the capabilities will not be the same. And I think that is the most important thing, is not to look at the declarations, but to look at what capabilities they have. And before the operation, we knew they were racing for a nuclear capability. The ballistic missiles, we saw them all around the region, not only targeting Israel, the entire Gulf, Cyprus, Turkey. They are threatening the entire Middle East. So I think when you look at the results, we will have to look at what they will have the day after. And I can guarantee you that they will not have the same power they had before the operation.
Ambassador, you say Iran was racing towards a nuclear capability, and President Trump has argued both that there was an imminent threat and that Iran could have a nuclear weapon within weeks. But neither he nor Israel has shared any evidence to back that up. Do you intend to share evidence at some point?
But what evidence you need? First of all, they declared what their intentions are. Regarding the nuclear program, they enrich uranium above 60%. They put all the facilities in the mountains. So we didn't want to wait for the point of no return that they will actually assemble the nuclear warheads on the ballistic missiles. That would have been too late for us. So I think President Trump acted, showed leadership, showed moral clarity. And basically what we are saying, we will not make the mistake that the Western civilization did with North Korea. That, there were negotiations, delays, talks, and then one morning we woke up and North Korea has nuclear power and ballistic missiles that can threaten many countries.
But sir, I hear you saying that you don't want to wake up one day and find that we're at the point of no return, to use your phrase. But given the specific claims that Donald Trump has been making, an imminent threat, a nuclear weapon within weeks, do you not think it's appropriate, given the scale of Israel and America's military action, to share details of what you and what America knows?
No, we have good intelligence. We will not share everything with everyone. But what can I tell you? That, look at the ballistic missiles. No one can argue about the capabilities of the ballistic missiles. Now, we know they have the nuclear program. We know they have enriched uranium that is more than enough to put together 11 bombs at least. And by the way, people speak a lot about the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. No one speaks about thousands of kilograms of uranium which is enriched in lower levels, but very fast they can actually level it up. So we knew it, they had all the materials ready. So now the question is, when they will assemble it, we decided not to wait for them to decide about it.
So that was Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, speaking to my colleague Ros Atkins there. Let's take you live to Beirut this morning, where it's almost 7:30 in the morning. This is, of course, the capital of Lebanon, where the health minister, the government's health minister, announced yesterday nearly 400 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon so far. You're with BBC News.